12 boys from a soccer team and their coach were trapped in the flooded Tham Luang caves in northern Thailand. The entire world, without exaggeration, followed the rescue operation, which lasted more than 2 weeks. My name is Nikita, and you're watching Based on True Events. Today, we'll talk about the incredible story that inspired the film 13 Lives. There will be spoilers in this story, but I'm confident that the more you learn about these extraordinary events, the more you'll want to watch the movie. On June 23, 2018, one of the players from the youth soccer team, the Wild Boars, was celebrating his birthday. To mark the occasion, the team's coach, Ekapol Chantawong, decided to take the boys to the Tham Luang Cave Complex, a regular adventure for them. From July to November, the caves are closed due to the rainy season, so the boys were eager to visit before they shut down. On that day, meteorologists had predicted rain, though at that time of year, such forecasts were almost a daily occurrence. Perhaps that's why neither the coach nor the boys paid much attention to it. After all, they had visited the cave many times before. Leaving their bicycles at the entrance, equipped with flashlights, some snacks, and water, the group ventured inside. At the entrance of the cave is a spacious 80-meter hall, from which a partially equipped trail, about 1 kilometer long, leads tourists. Beyond that, however, the cave becomes a series of chambers and collapses, and after a few hundred meters, it narrows down a lot. In some places, the height is less than a meter. After 2 kilometers, the cave makes a sharp 180-degree turn. In certain parts, the passage becomes so narrow that one can only crawl through. In total, the cave stretches over 10 kilometers, and a constant stream of water runs through it. When the team had ventured deep into the cave, a heavy downpour began outside, quickly flooding the cave and cutting off the boys' path to the exit. When the children didn't return home on the evening of June 23, their parents grew alarmed. Arriving at the cave entrance with rescuers, they found the boys' bicycles at the entrance. There was no doubt that the team was inside. The rescuers entered the cave, but a few hundred meters past the end of the tourist trail, they encountered a flooded section. Everyone could only hope that the boys and their coach had managed to find an air pocket deeper within the cave. Navy SEAL divers from the Thai military were called to the site. By 4 a.m. on June 25, they made their first attempt to penetrate deeper into the flooded caves. However, the conditions they encountered were drastically different from the warm, clear ocean waters the divers were accustomed to. The water in the cave was murky, with strong currents and very cold. Moreover, the cave was filled with numerous stalactites and stalagmites, posing a significant danger in low visibility conditions. The divers' first attempt was unsuccessful. The next day, on June 26, the Thai Navy SEALs managed to reach a junction in the cave, but the strong current pushed them back once again. Moreover, they discovered that the air pocket where they had hoped to find the team was completely flooded. Industrial pumps were brought to the rescue site to drain the water, potentially buying time for the trapped boys. Thanks to these pumps, the water level was slowly receding, but if the weather worsened, the water could rise rapidly. During the summer months, Thailand experiences monsoon season, where heavy rains can last for days without stopping, making this scenario highly likely. British cave explorer Vern Unsworth, who lived in Thailand, advised the authorities to seek help from British cave diving specialists. On June 27, their team arrived at the site. In the following days, groups from the US, Australia, China, and dozens of volunteer divers from other countries joined the effort. A total of 40 local and 50 foreign divers played an active role in the operation. Among the specialists who arrived from Britain were two key figures in this story, John Valenthin and Rick Stanton. In the film 13 Lives, they were portrayed by Colin Farrell and Viggo Mortensen. John Valenthin, 47, is a computer engineer who practices diving in his free time. Richard Stanton, 57, is a firefighter from Coventry. In 2010, this pair set a world record by swimming 9 kilometers through an underwater cave in Spain. In parallel with the divers' efforts, other specialists were exploring alternative methods. Drones were deployed into the cave in the hope of determining the boys' location. On the surface, canine units with dogs scoured the area, searching for other possible entrances to the mountain tunnels. 13 drilling points were identified to create holes in the cave walls. One of them reached a depth of 400 meters, but encountered a layer of granite, which could only be penetrated by explosives. Due to the risk of collapse, this method was abandoned. This part of the operation is barely touched upon in the film. However, the movie does highlight the volunteers' efforts to divert mountain streams away from the cave. As a result of altering the natural water flow, nearby farmland around the mountain complex became completely flooded. In total, around 10,000 people participated in the rescue operation. This included over 100 divers, 2,000 military personnel, 1,000 police officers, hundreds of government officials, and several thousand volunteers with various skills. Additionally, 1,500 journalists covered the events with live broadcasts from the scene. The first attempts by the foreign divers were not very successful, either due to the same floodwaters that had hindered the Thai military. On June 28, as the heavy rains intensified, the rescue operation had to be temporarily halted. However, during their first dive, just a few hundred meters from the entrance, Rick and John discovered 4 workers. In the early hours of the rescue operation, these workers had been sent to install pumps, but had themselves been trapped by the rising water and were stuck in one of the cave chambers. The divers gave them a spare oxygen tank and attempted to guide them out of the cave. During the rescue, one of the workers nearly drowned, even though the dive lasted only about a minute. In the film, this part of the story was downplayed, reducing the number of workers from 4 to just 1. On June 30, the British divers, now equipped with the necessary gear, managed to advance deeper into the cave than the Thai Navy SEALs. However, they were still far from reaching the next suspected location of the boys. Nevertheless, since the divers were able to push the search forward and the pumps had removed a significant amount of water, a base camp was established in the 3rd chamber of the cave. This served as a staging area where air tanks were delivered, allowing the search teams to work longer and venture deeper into the cave. On 2nd of July, John Valanthan and Rick Stanton, being the most experienced, were placing navigation markers in the cave. At around 10 p.m. local time, they found themselves 400 meters from the area known as Pattaya Beach. There, on a small rocky ledge in complete darkness, they discovered the boys and their coach. All 13 were alive. Only one of the boys spoke English, making communication difficult. Nevertheless, the divers were able to explain that they would return with help. The video footage from the divers' cameras spread around the world, bringing immense excitement and relief. However, finding the boys did not mean they were saved. The location where they were discovered was 4 kilometers from the cave entrance, with much of that distance completely submerged. Later, Stanton recalled, "As we were heading back, I glanced at John and realized he was thinking the same thing I was, that we might be the last ones to see them alive." The next day, 7 Thai Navy SEAL divers delivered water, medicine, and high-calorie food to the boys. 4 of the divers decided to stay in the cave with the children, as they had used too much air on the journey there, making the return trip too risky for them. The rescuers were faced with a critical question. Should they find a way to extract the children from the flooded cave, or wait until the rainy season ended? It's important to remember that the divers' journey to the boys was far from an easy task. They risked their lives with every dive. Another factor against waiting was the steadily decreasing oxygen levels in the cave, which made delaying the rescue increasingly dangerous. The approaching rains threatened to flood the cave completely. Only one option remained: to extract the boys the same way, through the route that even the world's best divers struggled to navigate. To execute this plan, Rick and John assembled a team of their acquaintances of the best cave divers in the world. Elon Musk also attempted to contribute to the rescue by asking SpaceX engineers to create a miniature submarine from parts of the Falcon 9 rocket to evacuate the children. However, when the device was brought to the rescue site, the rescuers deemed it entirely unsuitable for the conditions. Vern Unsworth, the cave expert we know, accused Musk of trying to use the tragedy for publicity. On July 4, the boys began basic scuba diving training. They were taught how to use a mask and breathe through an oxygen tank. On July 6, while positioning oxygen tanks, volunteer and retired Navy SEAL Salman Kunan tragically died. A few months later, another Thai Navy SEAL, Beirut Pakbara also became a casualty of the rescue mission due to a blood infection. On July 8, the operation to rescue the boys began. The team included 5 divers from the Thai Navy SEALs and 13 members of the international team. In addition to John and Rick, the team also featured Australian diver and anesthesiologist Richard Harris. One of the key challenges of the rescue was the risk that the boys who had never dived before could panic during the long underwater journey. This could lead them to remove their masks or thrash around, potentially endangering both themselves and the divers. Therefore, before the dive, Dr. Richard Harris administered 3 different drugs to each child. A high dose of ketamine induced a state of sleep. Xanax prevented anxiety, and atropine reduced saliva production to prevent choking. The children's hands and feet were tied to make it easier for the divers to transport them. Administering powerful drugs to weaken children was undoubtedly a huge risk. Even Dr. Harris initially resisted the idea. The parents of the children were not informed about the rescuers' plans. Local authorities took full responsibility for the operation and later denied the use of strong sedatives. Before the operation began, Dr. Harris received assurances of immunity from the Thai government in case the plan failed. This risky approach offered a chance to save at least some of the boys rather than losing all of them. Another challenge was that the sedative effect of the anesthesia lasted only about 45 minutes, while the journey to the cave's exit took around 3 hours. Therefore, along the way, the divers had to administer additional injections to the children. Nevertheless, one of the boys did wake up during the dive. However, an additional dose quickly put him back to sleep. After each short dive, the boys were brought to a dry zone where their equipment was removed and they were examined. Then they were transported 200 meters further via a pulley system, after which they were prepared for another dive. From there, the divers transported them to the 3rd chamber where their equipment was finally removed. The boys were then carried out of the cave through a human chain of hundreds of rescuers aided by a rope system. On the first day, 4 boys were brought out of the cave. In an interview later, their coach Ekapol mentioned that they chose the rescue order based on who lived farthest from the cave, as they thought they would be riding their bicycles home once they got out. On the 2nd day, another 4 boys were brought out of the cave. Thanks to the experience gained from the previous day, the divers managed to reduce the transportation time from 3 hours to 2. On July 10, when only the last 4 boys and the coach remained to be rescued, the rain resumed and the water level began to rise. At the command center, there were discussions about postponing the final stage of the operation. For the divers, it was clear that if they didn't act immediately, the increasing currents would soon make it impossible for anyone to enter the cave. Without waiting for a decision, the divers simply headed back into the cave. The coach and 3 of the boys were successfully rescued, but during the rescue of the last child, diver Chris Jewell lost hold of the guide rope. The murky water prevented him from finding it again. After some time, he felt an electric cable and decided to follow it, hoping it would also lead him to the 3rd chamber. However, when he surfaced, he found himself alone with no one around. Chris thought he might have ended up in a chamber off the main route and feared no one would find him. At that moment, Richard Harris surfaced nearby, returning from the 9th chamber. It turned out that Chris had simply returned to the 4th chamber instead of the 3rd. Richard then told Chris to take a breather while he would escort the last boy out. In the end, all 3, Chris, Richard, and the final boy, safely made it out. The last to leave the cave were the 3 Navy SEALs and the military doctor who had spent the past week with the boys. During their dive, for an unknown reason, the main pump stopped working, causing a rapid rise in water levels. Rescuers in the 3rd chamber had to make an emergency evacuation. By the time the final diver emerged from the cave, everyone had already abandoned nearly submerged 3rd chamber. After the rescue, the boys were taken to the hospital, where they underwent a brief rehabilitation. This included treatment for a lung infection, which was found in all team members after their time in the cave. Coach Ekapol could have faced criminal charges, but instead both the children and their parents expressed only gratitude towards him. During their time trapped in the cave, the coach, who had previously been a monk, taught the boys meditation, instilled hope for rescue, and carefully rationed the supplies. His actions helped the team survive long enough for help to arrive. Throughout this story, I've barely touched on how accurately the film portrays the real events. One of the key figures in the rescue, Rick Stanton, who served as a consultant for the movie, claims that director Ron Howard retold the story in a detailed and accurate manner with one exception. In reality, the caves were in complete darkness, and even the flashlights provided little help. Often, the divers had to navigate purely by feel. The film also vividly depicts the internal and interpersonal conflicts among the participants in the operation, particularly the tension between the British divers and the Thai military, as well as the day when the divers themselves were ready to give up. All of this has a basis in reality as well. In the end, it's fair to say that the film 13 Lives is very close to being a documentary. This story was filled with so many emotions and incredible moments that the filmmakers didn't need to invent anything to make the movie more captivating. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't hesitate to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next episode of Based on True Events.